Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
I want to start this episode by looking at a day in the life of an average dentist. So let's say you have a new patient and new patients come into your practice via hygiene. You know, there's no right or wrong. You could see them in hygiene or you might see them yourself. In any event, you're going to have to do an exam. Anyway, this patient is in your hygiene chair. Your hygienist has done a full mouth x-ray. They've done perio probing, and now it's time for you to come over and do your new patient exam. And you schedule on your schedule about 20 minutes to do these new patient exams. So you walk into the operatory and you spend the first 15 minutes, meeting the patient. This is a new patient after all, and doing the exam. And in that 15 minutes, you've determined that this patient needs an implant, 4 crowns, and some fillings. All right, so you have 5 minutes left in this appointment. As a matter of fact, your next patient is being seated in one of your treatment rooms. So you spend the next 5 minutes explaining the treatment plan you just found to this new patient. They need an implant, 4 crowns, and some fillings. And you tell them, because you only have 5 minutes, that they're going to discuss the financing and scheduling with the front desk or the treatment coordinator or whoever handles that in your practice. So the end of the day comes, and you want to find out what happened with this new patient. So you talk to your office manager or your treatment coordinator, and you find out that they said they wanted to think about it. They wanted to think about it, and they would let you know. And they've been added to the incomplete treatment plan list. So my first question would be, has that scenario ever happened to you? There is a really good chance it has happened to you. As a matter of fact, this happens a lot. So what went wrong here? Well, we could say a lot went wrong, but at first glance, one big thing went wrong, which is actually a very easy fix. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode of Dental Business RX. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host, and I've structured this episode to focus on a particular point about treatment presentation and acceptance that you could fix immediately and potentially start seeing really good results in your practice. Now, obviously, like anything we talk about on this podcast, you have to do what is real to you. If you're going to implement anything in your practice, you have to make sure you're happy about it. So, I'm giving you information. You can use it as you like, but ultimately, you're the one responsible for it. So that being said, what is this one particular thing that you could fix immediately that could help your treatment acceptance? It's very easy. It's scheduling adequate time to present. Scheduling adequate time to present. So let me explain, and we'll look at how this would implement into your practice. If you look at a dentist's schedule, we build in time in a dentist's schedule for diagnosis, and we build in time for actual clinical treatment. We do an exam, that's our diagnosis time, and that's scheduled and it's on the book. And then we build in time to actually do the procedures that the patient has accepted. But what time do we build into the schedule to make sure that they actually accept their treatment? Very rarely is time built into the schedule. So this is the subject of sales. We've talked about this before, that, sales is or sell is a 4-letter word in the dental profession. But there's really nothing wrong with selling. Essentially, when you're selling, you're basically, ethically selling at least. You're showing somebody why they need something so that they want it and they do it. So there's an organizational side to sales, and there is a skill side to sales. Skill is obvious. That's how good of a salesperson are you. The organizational side of sales has to do with scheduling. It has to do with treatment plan workups, putting a sheet together, figuring out what insurance covers and what it doesn't, and things of that nature. Okay? So what I'm going to cover in this episode is how to build out or flesh out the organizational side of sales in your practice, because here's how this works. I could take the best salesperson in the world, and if I put them in a scenario where I only give them 5 minutes to explain something, that may not be enough time to close that. They could be the best. They could close anything, but I give them not enough time, they can't close it. I could take a mediocre salesperson and I give them the proper amount of time, and they'll close some of those. So it'll look like the mediocre salesperson is a better salesperson than the good salesperson if I don't give the good one enough time and I give the mediocre one enough time. So time is a big player in this. So we're going to talk about this organizational side of sales. So what would we call adequate time in your schedule from a business perspective to sell. We'd call it a sales opportunity. And I keep saying this word adequate, adequate, adequate. Well, what do I mean by adequate time? I mean enough time to where you can sit down with somebody, explain to them what they need, why they need it, and I'll summarize this at the end of the episode and answer any questions they might have so that they can make a decision. For some people, that might be 10 minutes. That might be 20 for others, 30 for others. It really depends on the person. You'll kind of get an idea of a little bit of a default level of time that you want to schedule in your book for this. But what do we call this sales opportunity in dentistry? Well, we call it a consult. Now, most of us think of a consult in the dental industry as, the type of thing you would do when you have a full arch restoration or you're selling an all-on-4 case or something and you're coming in on a Friday just to see this patient because it's a humongous case. So sure, you would use consults for really, really big cases, but you could also use consults for, smaller cases. Obviously, I wouldn't use a consult for 2 occlusal composites. That you just tell the patient that they need fillings. But let's take a look at that scenario from earlier again here. That patient in my scenario earlier needed about $10,000 worth of treatment, depending on what you charge fee-wise, right? Well, all right, that's a decent-sized treatment plan. Let's say that patient was making $50,000 a year. So they need $10,000 worth of treatment, and they're making $50,000 a year. That doctor, in my example, spent 5 minutes explaining something that is going to cost this patient 1/5 of their annual income. That's just not going to work. I mean, heck, even if it was a smaller treatment plan, let's say it was $5,000 treatment plan and they make 50, that's 1/10 of their income. That's still a large purchase. So let's do a thought experiment. How much do you earn a year? You don't have to, obviously, we're not broadcasting live, so you don't have to say this, but think this for a second. Depending on who you are and where you're listening from, it might be 50, 100, 200, 600, whatever it is. But let's say you earn $200,000 a year. All right. And I ask you to buy something that is 1/5 of your annual income. You've just met me. All right. And I've spent 5 minutes explaining something and it's going to cost 1/5 of your annual income. Do you make that decision in 5 minutes? Probably not. Well, in a lot of cases, if this is your treatment presentation format, this is what happens, that's exactly what it is that you're doing. And you might say, well, I don't sell in my practice, my treatment coordinator sells, etc. I mean, look, we've talked about this before. It's one of the key tenets of the MGE program. You have different jobs in the practice as the doctor owner. You're the doctor, you're an owner or executive, and you're also the salesperson. There are different, hats you put on, so to speak. And from your sales hat, it absolutely is your job. And, let's be real. If you're not selling treatment, the doctor's not going to have any treatment to actually do. So it's kind of important. All right. We also cover the idea that the doctor should discuss fees, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But this is a critical part. Even if you have a treatment coordinator, you still have something to do with this. So let's take a look at how could you start creating time to sell in your practice right now? Well, there's a few things we can do. The first thing you can do is actually carve out some time in the schedule for consultations. And I should mention something, and I'll go back to that point. This is sort of a free-form episode, so what the heck. If you have time to present the treatment now, by all means do so. I've had some people think when I say, well, schedule consultation time, that means they always bring patients back for a consult. No, it's a lot easier. If you have time, do it now, which I'll talk about here in a second. But otherwise, if you don't, you're going to bring them back. So the first thing we're going to do is set up time in the schedule for consultations. Now, when would I put that in my schedule? I would do it first thing in the morning. You might have anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour open in the schedule for treatment presentations, and first thing after lunch. Now, why do it first thing in the morning? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, you're not into anything yet, because when you're presenting treatment, you want to be 100% distraction free. You don't want people coming in and out of wherever you're presenting the treatment, whether it's an operatory or your office. You want to just be completely focused on this patient so that you can answer any questions they might have and that they fully get you when you explain it. Also, if you do it first thing in the morning, if you happen to do primary time or primary procedures in the morning, you do larger procedures in the morning on your schedule, well, what happens if a patient cancels at the last minute? That happens, right? Well, okay, so play this scenario forward for a second. Let's say you have a patient scheduled at 10 for, 4 veneer preps, right? They're scheduled at 10 o'clock, and they call in that morning and say they've had a family emergency and they can't show up. Well, you've got 2 consults coming in, one at 9 and one at 9:20. there's a good chance, it's not always the case, that one of those two patients could actually take that 10 o'clock slot because you now have the time to present the treatment plan. Maybe one of them is off for work that day and you can save your production for the day. If you do it first thing after lunch, then even if you work through lunch, you can sit down with that patient completely distraction free. So now you have the time built into your schedule to do this. Now, a couple things happen when you have this time built in. Number one, you have slots on the schedule that need to be filled. And they're supposed to be filled with a certain type of a procedure, which is a treatment presentation. So let's walk it back for a second. If you want to produce something, perform a clinical procedure, you first have to get the patient to agree to it. And even before that, they have to need it. So that's, diagnosis, sales, actual doing treatment. So if I want to be doing more treatment, that means I have to sell more needed treatment, of course. We're not, it's only what people need. It means I have to sell more treatment. If I have more sales opportunities, my ability to sell treatment is going to go up. All right. We can always work on the skills side of sales, which for that, I recommend that you check out MGE seminars, the communication and sales seminars. I'll put a link in the description. That's where we handle the skills side of sales. All right. But the organizational side of sales, you have to have time built in to sell. So those slots tend to get filled, and then that is where your future production is coming from on your schedule. So that's when you put it on the schedule. So let's say you're doing a new patient exam. There would be a couple ways you could evaluate, what's your next move? Let's put ourselves in that same scenario I started the episode with. You've got 5 minutes left. You have a patient being seated in the next chair. That's a no-brainer. Bring this patient back for a consultation. Let's say you don't have a patient being seated in the chair. All right, well, then you might present the treatment now, but we're going to check a couple things before we do that. Number one, how much time do you have? Let's say you have an hour. Well, you got plenty of time. Then we want to find out how much time the patient has. So you might say, at the end of the exam, the patient's going to want to know, obviously, what's going on. You're going to want to discuss it with them. If you have the time, you might say, let's say his name's Bill. Bill, we could discuss this now. How much time do you have? Well, I'm off the rest of the day. Boom, you both have time. Great, right? Let's say Bill has to head out to go to work right away. Bring Bill back for a consultation so that you're not starting a treatment plan presentation that you can't finish. And this is critical. This is something we tell all of our clients early on. If you don't have time to present a case properly, do not start the presentation. You're better off not starting at all than getting in the middle of it and having the person leave. That's a surefire way to torpedo your treatment acceptance. All right? So the other factors that would play into this is the size of the case. Again, is if there's a couple fillings or a single crown and you have 5 minutes, that might be more than enough time to explain it. If it's a really large case and you have 5 minutes, that's not enough time to explain it. You're going to bring this patient back. And also the patient's attitude to a degree as well. Might not even be a humongous treatment plan, might be 2 crowns. But you're doing the exam and you don't have a lot of time to explain this after you finish the exam. And you can see the patient. You've seen patients like this who tell you, I've always taken great care of my teeth. My last dentist said that I had no dental problems. Well, you're going to tell them they need 2 crowns and that might just shatter their world. You might need a little bit more time for this. You might need 20 minutes that you don't have right now, in which case we're going to bring them back for a consultation and put them in one of those slots. So how do we get them to come back? Because one of the liabilities, so let's say we've gone into a treatment room, we've done the exam, and we've determined that we don't have time to present this case today. We don't, they don't, it's a large case, etc., whatever it is. Well, you want to bring them back, but there's always the risk that you're going to schedule them to come back and they're not going to show. Right? That happens. So there's a couple things you want to think with here. Number one, you want to get them back in as soon as humanly possible, like tomorrow morning or the day after in the morning. You want them back quickly. All right. You don't want to add a lot of extra wait time to this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you don't want to get into their treatment plan before they come back. You don't want to go, oh yeah, you need an implant and 4 crowns and I'll show you why when you come back for this appointment. Yeah, they won't be coming back. Pretty much. You can guarantee they're not going to come back. What you could do is you would explain to them, you want to make a couple of points. Number one, you want to have time to review their treatment plan. You want to make sure that you have the exact plan figured out the way that you want to help them. And, you're going to sit down with them and answer all their questions and everything else at the consultation. In other words, as the doctor, and remember, patients are most apt to listen to the doctor. You're asking for a little bit of time to make sure that you get it exactly right for them so that when you guys sit down together, and you're also offering up yourself for free, basically, to sit down and answer all their questions so that they know exactly what their plan of treatment is. All right? So that's the idea, to get them back, and obviously get them back quickly. All right. So now, when you get them back for that consultation, or if you're doing the consultation that day, they have time, you have time, boom, you're just doing it right now. What are some of the things you're going to want to do? So now, obviously, at the things like the sales seminars that I talked about earlier, we get into the skill aspect of this, communication skill and things like this. But you essentially want to make sure that 6 things happen. Number 1, you want to explain exactly what's going on in a way that is accessible to the patient. You don't want to throw a ton of big words out there so they have no idea what you're talking about. Make sure they fully understand what you're saying. Number 2, you want to cover how you want to fix that. Number 3, you want to go over why you need to fix that. If they're missing a tooth, why do you need to fix that? They've been missing that tooth for 3 years. Well, you can show them that the teeth behind it are starting to curve inwards, or the tooth above it is starting to super erupt. In other words, why is this important? Okay, that's critical. You want to go over what the consequences of not fixing it are. Like, look, if we don't take care of this, here's what might happen. And you want to go over the cost. Yes, you want to go over the cost. The doctor should mention the fee. I usually like the doctor to take a little bit further, but you at least want to tell the patient, yes, this is going to cost about $10,000. Why is it doctors hate mentioning the fee? They hate mentioning the fee because sometimes people get mad when you talk about money. Well, look, it's your business. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to talk about this. And you'll find this can create an amazing increase in case acceptance if you just tell patients how much they cost. I'm not telling you to sit down and figure out what their payment plan is going to be or what credit card they're going to put it on. Your treatment coordinator can do that. But you should at least tell them how much it costs. And you want to make sure enough time is built in to answer any questions they may have about this treatment plan afterwards, right? So again, if you don't have time to do all that, don't start the treatment presentation. That'll get you in trouble. People are halfway, half-baked, so to speak, and they walk out and you never hear from them again. All right. And again, if you can present it now, present it now. And, MGE clients, when they first start, normally go through this whole process with every patient. They'll go over the fee and discuss with the patient how they might pay for it. Right. Now, eventually, if you know how to sell, eventually you can get a treatment coordinator who also knows how to sell and start delegating some of these functions. But I wouldn't do that until I know how to do it myself. Otherwise, you're sort of putting yourself in a negative position. If I have no idea how to discuss finances with a patient, let's say I'm the doctor, and I have a staff member who can, well, I'm completely at effect with regards to this situation. The staff member is the one in charge, and there's nothing wrong with staff being in charge and responsible and competent, whatever, but what if the staff member leaves the state? Well, I'm in trouble now. I got to find somebody else who can replace him. You should know how to do this yourself. It is your business. So I know I kind of ran on there a bit about that, but I hope you get the general message here. You need to start building time into your schedule to sell. And if you actually start tracking how many of these opportunities you have, you'll start to be able to relate this to the amount of treatment that you're actually closing and doing. And if you have that time on the schedule and your staff know that that's what this time is for, they're going to work to make sure those appointments are full and that you have future production on your books. All right, I know it was a very specific episode, but this is something you can change right now. I hope this helped. I have the links to everything we mentioned in the description. Otherwise, that about does it for me for this week's episode. We'll see you at the next episode.